Yeah.
When I first made the correlations between Kabbalah and science, I was stunned.
We do know that Isaac Newton had access to certain mystical texts, certain texts of the Kabbalah.
Well, the Kabbalistic description of creation is coming from a single little point, from a speck, and of having matter form and time and space form all together at the very beginning. This sounds very much to me like the description of the Big Bang.
I couldn't believe that the Kabbalists could derive these truths without really knowing any mathematics or physics.
It is certainly true that in string theory, the number 10 is the dimension of spacetime for supersymmetrical string theories, and 26 for bosonic string theories stand out as a requirement of the mathematics.
All the things that could destroy string theory, all the things that do destroy every rival theory to string theory, they are all eliminated in precisely 10 and 26 dimensions. These dimensions are magic. We physicists don't know where these dimensions come from.
The Zohar says those things. It could have been a lucky guess. I don't know.
The Zohar speaks of impure fats and pure fats, and that relates very well to modern medicine's view of the two types of cholesterol.
Now you tell me, how come that's the only text of 2,000 years old can have that kind of information so clearly there?
They knew things about the universe that took us till now to discover.
I think it's rather intriguing that the Zohar mentions cholesterol and mentions the liver and bile.
What I like about Kabbalah is that it has a rather profound view of a creator, of a divine being that transcends all possible notions that we could have.
There can be an interface between science and spirituality.
The Zohar's notion that light is a realm of no time and no space is quite consistent with special relativity.
What's been stopping it so far are, number one, the lack of a good concept, and I think the Kabbalah is offering that now in the context of modern science, and two, a reticence on the part of both scientists and people in religion to mix the two.
It's rather amazing, this uncanny reflection of some of the most advanced cosmology coming from our satellites, coming from our atom smashers, coming from our blackboards, that are mirrored in the Zohar and ancient Kabbalistic texts.
Thoughts on that, Adam?
That's the video that I was basically referencing earlier. I have that up on my channel, and isn't it creepy? It's like all of these different, mainstream media, TV scientists are all sharing this same talking point, almost like this is like a script in a way, because the Zohar does not predict anything special. There's no magic or, there's no metaphysical secrets or deep knowledge or anything like that. And in fact, what it actually is a story about the shattering of the vessels. Kabbalah and Lurianic Kabbalah from Isaac Luria, one of the top rabbis in their history of Judaism, says that basically the Gentile world, the Esau darkness, impure world is the Kelly pot, the shards of the shattered vessels that couldn't contain the divine light from God, and the shattered sparks of divine light, which basically means the Jewish people, the Jewish souls, is concealed by the evil dark husks, the Kelipa, and that they need to remove and cut off and totally annihilate the Kelipa, which they liken to Gentiles, to Esau, to Christianity, to Amalek, anybody that opposes them. That's what's in Kabbalah. It's actually very supremacist and genocidal manifesto, essentially, that is just based upon and predicated on Talmud and Torah text.
Yeah, and what's really alarming to me is that these guys like Michio Kaku and others like him who subscribe to this, they are who you have to kind of trust when it comes to certain scientific subjects as far as how things are. For example, a lot of these the largest observatories owned by the Vatican, for example. So, their employees, their representatives, they must have more truth than I could ever derive, with any equipment that I might get. That's the implication. Likewise, when it comes to space related subject matter, oftentimes you follow the money. It leads up into these super secretive enclaves of really alarming ideologues. Look at the founding of NASA, right, and the occultists involved with that. And, I'm supposed to believe that they landed a man on the moon and that they're telling us everything that is available as far as knowledge goes about where we live and what we live on. You know, it's the same kind of mystery. They leave us with so much mystery. Coming from a Catholic background, we used to say that for questions that you couldn't really get a good answer for, well, that's the mystery of our faith. You know, so when you ask certain questions about, say, space travel to NASA, they say, well, we don't really know, or we think we know, but you could never know. And it's just like, kind of like, you have to kind of accept that, oh, this is the mystery of our faith. Oh, so it's faith-based, right? We have to trust and believe these high priests of science.
I mean, if they could deceive the whole world with a fake religion worshiping somebody that didn't exist,
Right.
and that was openly intended, meant to rule over them and conquer them and subjugate them and reign over them, and then you know, and then seeing the way everything is so controlled and all the lies, I could definitely see these occult people pulling off some lies.
Yeah.
But as far as like the Vatican and, you know, their telescope, like, I mean, what do you think that the Vatican's lying about with their telescope?
Well, I think the whole conception of the Earth, you know, us being a spinning ball in this infinite vacuum of space, and that, you know, we can blast people off into far distant planets. All of that is kind of...
But we haven't done that.
Well, right.
We haven't sent anybody to planets.
No, but they claim that it's possible. Oh, you know, rovers to Mars, as an example, as a precursor to that idea. You know,
You
NASA
could see Mars with a backyard telescope. Like, if you can see it, they could shoot something out up there. You don't think so?
Well, that's an interesting point. So the telescopes that most people can access, including the so-called telescopic imagery, uses a magnification technique that artificially refracts away the light and sort of sphericizes or renders the lights that are being gazed upon as looking more solid than they actually are. You can compare this phenomena between like a 100x telescope versus like a 1000x plus digital zoom, and though that there's a very different phenomena that is being intermediated there through the machine itself, or through the instrument itself. And so that is another basis for a lot of this cosmological subversion. Is if you go back to the philosophies of Democritus, you know, you see the creation of atomism as the notion that everything is reducible to atom or void, right? And that was heavily repudiated by Socrates, of course, and, you know, Plato didn't like that either. So there's always been sort of an ongoing debate as to the epistemological.
People have known about these planets going back, you know, since long before Judaism. And the ancients could, I mean, we can see most planets with the naked eye, like Aquarian TV says. And we can see the moon, how it's a circle in a sphere. We can see the eclipses. We can see that no matter what eclipse, when it's the sun is shining on the earth, you can see that it's a curve from every different angle. So,
well,
what do you think explains that?
Well, okay, so that particular description, the ancients did. They were able to they had sophisticated ways of calculating the movements of the heavens, but they did not in those calculations surmise that the surface area upon which the phenomena were being observed was based upon a curved orientation. So in other words, we've seen this manipulation of our reality principle happen incrementally, to where we're basically kind of being gaslit into denying our own experience, and instead imbibing or accepting these sort of mystical authoritarian proclamations about the lights in the heavens. And it actually goes back to Hipparchus, who was the founder of trigonometry, and he had many important discoveries. However, when it came to the topic of the luminaries, or the lights in the sky, he presumed, again, no real investigation into this, because it really can't be experientially proved, that he said, for all intents and purposes, the lights in the heavens are infinitely far away. And this is a foundational presumption that did indeed influence a lot of the subsequent attempts to declare the earth or the lights in the heavens to be spheres. And that's actually a mystery school invention as well. The Samothracian Kabiri, the initiates in that order saw themselves as demigods, and they used an initiation ritual that sought to characterize all of the lights in the sky as other spheres that were dominated by higher demigods. And so the point of the mystery ritual was to make them believe that they themselves, through their initiation, were becoming demigods over the goddess Gaia. And so Gaia was essentially turned into one of these orbs, which is really the realm upon which we experience reality. And that in itself became an egregore or a thought form that was continually referenced over and over again as the basis for phenomenological observation. And so I see it as an example of, again, a sort of mystical authoritarianism, where we can't actually verify or forensically measure any of these gazings upon that which we don't have any real dominion over, that which is that is informing things.
Hold on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
I asked, just a few years ago, I was able to go outside and look at the moon and see that the curve of the Earth, the shadow with the sun shining on the Earth, was a curve. And it looked like a big sphere. And that's how it happens every single time, no matter where they're lined up, showing that it's not a disc that's a circle, it's a sphere that's a circle.
Well,
so my eyes aren't lying to me when I use the little thing to protect your eyes and look up at it.
Adam, I would say the same thing. My eyes don't lie to me, and there's a video I posted on our official Telegram where it was like 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and I'm looking at the sun in the sky, and I can also see the moon juxtaposed with the sun. So if they're juxtaposed with one another, how could the Earth possibly be casting a shadow? All right, Xavier, riddle me this. It's almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can fucking see the moon. Now, if the moon is there, and it's in the sky for people at night on the other side of the world, and the crescent is like our shadow being cast by the sun, but the sun is right there. How is it crescent in broad daylight and they coexist in the sky at the same time? So we have to consider the possibility that the moon phases as we see them. The shadow is one potential explanation, but what if the moon itself is casting its own light and has its own phase that isn't necessarily governed by a shadow?
I can look up at the moon during the daytime or at night, and you can see the side that's being lit, and you can still see the outline of the back half, the dark side that's not lit. You can see the whole thing. They don't have just half of the light on.
I know, that's what I'm saying, though, is if this
mechanism would be able to plant a sun or plant a moon that high in the air and fuel it and sustain it. Like, I'm kind of confused here, because it's usually Bible believers that are promoting the flat Earth and
unfortunately
firmament type of dome ideas.
Unfortunately so.
It's a conspiracy hiding the creator God and convincing us, like a huge conspiracy that they're like, you say that we're not on a planet flying through space. How do you explain the asteroids that crash in that we can see, or comets that they've measured have hit before?
Well, where's the remains
space
of
dust crashing into us?
Well, again, I think that we're sort of getting a little bit sidetracked on the broader discussion, but
I'm having Owen Benjamin on tomorrow, who is into this stuff. So I expected this tomorrow, but I didn't think it was going to turn that way today. But I guess, I don't know, I'll consider practice for the big bear.
Well, sure. I mean,
I've never really gotten deep into flat Earth.
Okay. So that's
the Judeo threat.
That's an important admission. I'm basically offering up the very real.
I haven't studied it. I've studied it some, but I just don't usually, spend my time talking about it.
Sure, and our offering really here is to demonstrate that in much the same way that you've discovered a lot of these theological subversions over people's imagination as to what God is or what the creator is, that there is very much so a scientific and epistemological form of subversion that seeks to implant, again at a very early age, the power of suggestion through almost hypnotic relay, that this is the only explanation for real world phenomena, including the lights in the skies that we perceive. So the thing that's interesting about the moon is you could designate it as a diodic plasma that actually has a phase that we simply, in our frame of reference for time, don't see the rapidity with which it's actually occurring. We're beings that, traditionally speaking, can only have a predominant sense through the eye, and so there is an argument to be had that if you superimpose a framework that guides your perceptions about reality, then your perceptions are going to necessarily conform to that frame of reference. And so that's being had in the sciences when it comes to astrophysics, when it comes to the biological sciences, when it comes to many of the things that we deem to be hard science, are very much informed by these same kind of power suggestion, hypnotic trance illusions and appeals to authoritarianism.
You're saying that everybody's under a hypnotic trance when we look at the moon?
No, I'm saying that the frame of reference that we're applying to that perception is a subverted frame of reference.
This reminds me of like Greek Orthodox Christian pill pull a little bit, to be honest. I feel like the fact that so many millions and hundreds of millions in America believe that Jews are chosen by God and that they believe that they're saved from hell because of a blood magic ritual, I feel like is much more of a substantial thing that we can focus on and prove. And that's honestly, I think the flat Earth stuff is just nothing but a distraction that discredits. I almost, and I'm not saying you guys are like, promoting this as agents or anything. I think a lot of people sincerely believe this, but in my mind, it's just kind of seems like a distraction. I'll just leave it there.
Well, the problem with that is that it can't have been a distraction because this has been an ongoing debate for a really, really long time. It really goes back to days before Socrates, and again, the Hipparchus assumption that the lights in the sky are essentially infinitely far away, and there's no way to prove that presumption, yet it's been unchecked and it's been allowed to build a mass misconception about the very reality in which we live. So I think really the argument I'm trying to bring forth is that there are so many mass misconceptions that there really isn't a whole lot of safe territory when it comes to the extent to which we've been given a kind of false cosmology or a false understanding of things, and that is, of course, pertains to the theological question, but I think it also pertains to much more on the ground sort of physical phenomena as well. And I just to answer the assertion that it's sort of Greek Orthodox pill pull. I don't know. I don't think that's a terribly fair characterization, because I'm very critical of the various schizophrenia and the schisms that are part and parcel to religious histories, especially within Abrahamism and all the different schisms that are involved there. So, from a philosophical point of view, I think it is important to suspend one's disbelief in the assertion that perhaps there are more mass misconceptions that operate in a perhaps subconscious or unconscious fashion due to inculcation from an early age, where we uncritically accept things that this very much could be this very much could pertain to the sciences themselves. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring up the influence of Kabbalah on science, because it shows that many of the premises of science can be philosophically hijacked, and that many of the so-called discoveries can have deceptive frames of reference.
I definitely agree to that.
Yeah. And so, that's all I'm basically indicating, is that the more you go down this.
But hold on, real quick. What they were like connecting very theoretical things to Kabbalah, like, I can look up. I saw Halley's Comet, right, or Hale-Bopp. I could see that with a telescope. So like, I know I can see all the stars in the sky, and I don't think, that's my lying eyes. I think those are very distant, reacting stars like the sun that we have. I mean, what do you think? How do you explain it all? I mean, isn't that amazing and a miracle and crazy enough as it is? Like, why is it? You said, oh, it's like you think they're lying about how far away the other planets are. Like, why what do they gain by this lie? Who is behind
this is a very good question.
This whole thing.
Okay, it's gained. There's an incentive to convince people of their lack of significance through evolutionary accident. There's an incentive to hide resources or discoverable lands that would allow for more population. There's an incentive to essentially create a new authoritarian class of scientific interpreters that operates like a priest class over the understanding of subjects that they actually don't have any real forensic knowledge about either, but they're LARPing as though they do. And so it creates a huge economic boondoggle as well to provide money laundering troughs towards these pseudoscientific aims, and that acts as a form of economic subversion on top of a cosmological subversion. So I think there's plenty of incentives.
So I wanted to ask you, talk about like more land or extra resources. You think that there's just like other realms, other places like over the ice wall?
Well, okay, so the Antarctic Treaty, for example, is the longest standing, uninterrupted, uncontested, zero issues have been made about that agreement.
We can disagree on a lot, but we can all agree you can't explore beyond Antarctica.
Right. And that there is a gate-kept, highly very well-funded attempt to essentially gatekeep any further exploration on the so-called continent, which I believe, if you look at the Hammond's air map, which was the actual air map used in World War II, that directed all of these fighter planes all over the place and these bombers, that they were not using any kind of spherical coordinate basis for those flights. They were using the Euclidean flat stationary map to guide all these expeditions. And if you look at Admiral Richard Byrd, all of those military forays into the Antarctic.
Well, you may have seen it on your way to work or school or just driving around. A new billboard has some people thinking about the Earth.
And asking the question, could the Earth be flat?
0915 hours. In the distance is what appears to be mountains.
But strangely enough, there is left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole, from Middle America.
1005 hours. I cannot see the sun anymore. We make another left turn and we spot what seems to be a large animal of some kind below. 1130 hours. Countryside below is more level and normal, if I may use that word. Ahead we spot what seems to be a city.
The Antarctic continent is surrounded by a belt of ice, frozen seas of at least 1,200 miles thick. Now the south is a plateau. It gets in some places 14,000 feet up.
I'm here to say we need to act. We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
Much of it is shrouded in mystery.
I've heard this stuff before. So your answer basically is you do think there's something beyond the ice wall. Other land that there's.
Well, let me make it a little simpler. Forget about the shape of the Earth for a moment.
Right.
Try to buy a drone that can fly 10 miles. You can find them. You can buy them. But like the government actually governs who can fly and who can't. They literally draw an airspace through the FAA, and if your drone is in that airspace, it'll turn off. And the same is true for commercial flights.
We just learned that the FAA has put out a temporary flight restriction, a TFR, in the area immediately around the port of entry where that bridge is. What does that mean? It means our drone can no longer fly and show those images. It's a 2-week TFR, and according to the FAA, it's for special security reasons.
So they do have this top-down technocratic control, and why wouldn't they censor? Forget about Antarctica for a minute.
Right.
They're probably censoring land that we do know about and could potentially explore because they have some sort of national security interest or, UN World Heritage Site.
Right.
Who knows what they've sequestered? I mean, censorship is not relegated to the internet. It's history. It's cartographic.
There could be other reasons that they don't allow drones or planes or people going down to the Arctic, but there could be plenty of other explanations besides that there's a whole other realms and other lands where the Earth is actually flat. I mean, because like I said, you can see the eclipses on the moon, the curve of the Earth.
Well, yeah, but the Mayans were able to predict eclipses long before there was any so-called forensic calendared measurement. I mean, in other words, a lot of the stuff that we use as data to verify the heliocentric worldview was already in existence with cultures and cosmologies that had no such purview about these particular phenomena. So it's easy to actually calculate eclipse cycles. You don't need those. You don't need the phenomena to accord to an enlarged atomistic projection of the universe. I mean, that's essentially what astrophysics is it's an enlargement and a superimposed projection of atomistic presumptions and axioms. And in the same way that we look under the microscope, right, there's another intermediation of our perception to the phenomena in question. So there's a lot of room for distortion and deception within that realm too. The whole really macro-micro bifurcation is one of the kind of schizophrenic epistemological problems that we face going forward, and it's replicated in ideas pertaining to subject and object. It portends to the notion of soul and mind and body. All these different schisms I think, go back to a fundamental separatistic belief in the composition of the human being within the world. And I think that the world in which we reside is much more complex and nuanced than we would like to allege with the current scientific models that we're using today. So that being said, I think that looking at some of these clips that I forwarded to you might at least open more inquiry into this subject as to how gerrymandered and easily manipulated so-called scientific understandings and frames of references around reality actually are. So do you have this actually clip right here?
Yeah, it's queued up.
All right, yeah, go ahead and play this. So because this answers your question about yeah, astrophysics, it is very theoretical, but the ability to subvert so-called hard sciences is kind of laid bare in a couple different clips here that I've got queued up.
Science is Wissenschaft. And you heard its Yiddish cognate, Wissenschaft, earlier today in Tony Michaels' lecture. But Wissenschaft, or science, has always had a more expansive meaning in German, and in the German context, than the Anglo-American conception of science. German science is not restricted to the study of nature or humanity's interaction with the natural world. In German, science can also refer to philosophy, for example, including metaphysics and epistemology, so studies of what is reality, and also how do we know that reality. That's epistemology, the study of the philosophical study of knowledge. Science also encompasses the field of knowledge that we call the humanities, and usually kind of pit as the pair or the opposite of science versus the humanities. So in the German context, Wissenschaft encompasses both, or can encompass both. So let's say a little bit more specifically then, if that's true, does this term in German have any meaning, Wissenschaft, or what I'll often be just calling German science instead of using this German term. So when you go to the German context, the term Wissenschaft, there are basically two ways in which you can use this. You can talk about Wissenschaft, or science with a capital S, in an abstract way. And then what you would be talking about is a set of practices and also ideals or values for acquiring rigorous knowledge. Obviously you might say, oh, what makes something rigorous? That depends on intellectual communities who define that. In this time, the 1800s, they had a conception of what rigor meant, but it was also one that they were debating, they were thinking about it. So that's one sense. Some kind of, and you can see that this doesn't have to be only studies of the natural world. This could be, you could be studying anthropology and still say, have some kind of conception of some kind of set of practices and ideals that give you in that field rigorous knowledge, what you would define as rigorous knowledge. So that's Wissenschaft in one sense. The other sense of it is in a more particular kind of definition, where you're really talking about a specific field of study. So in the English usage, actually, there is such a term as, or such a phrase as, he made a science of haircutting. So you're using that term science really to mean some kind of expertise. So the second German sense of Wissenschaft is a little bit closer to that. And what you're talking about there is the specific practices used to study one defined subject area. So for example, I'll throw another big German compound word at you, Altertumswissenschaft. Anyone know what that means? Altertumswissenschaft. Yeah, some of you are nodding your heads. No? Okay, so Altertum means antiquity. Altertumswissenschaft is the study, or is the science of classical antiquity. So what we're talking here about is basically what we call classics, right? But in German, that is science. So when you're talking about science in that sense, Wissenschaft in that sense, you're talking about, in a specific scholarly subfield, you have all these methods, all these standards that you use to evaluate evidence. And so science, so Wissenschaft can also refer to that kind of particular instance, a particular branch of learning where you talk about it as being involved in producing rigorous knowledge. In Germany, science as a concept experienced a boom in the early 1800s when it acquired new importance and prestige. The rise of science was closely connected to the founding of new universities in the German lands at this time. And these universities were the forerunners of the modern research university, in which faculty members were tasked with conducting advanced research and also teaching undergraduates and graduate students. Basically, the model of institutions such as the University of Wisconsin today. Research universities became the major sites for scientific inquiry over the next century and remain so. They really accelerated the process of what we would call scientific specialization and professionalization. Specialization, I mean that there are all these different branches of science, of study, different fields that people are going in, and they're hyper-specializing. They're focusing on what may seem like really small areas. My field, modern European Jewish history. To me, actually, that's huge. It's like, whoa, who can actually study all of modern European Jewish history in one lifetime? There's so much already to do, because we live in this age of specialization where scholars are producing so much material, so many discoveries, that you really always have to pick a small kind of corner of the field that you specialize in, that you work on, and that you can truly master. So that's one thing that's going on through the universities. And the other one, so that's specialization. The other one is professionalization. So what that means is, and to you that might seem obvious today, but it wasn't at the time when it was first happening, is that if you want to be a scientist or a scholar, a real scholar, not just a dilettante, like a person who does this as a hobby, you have to be at a university. You're going to be a professor, a teacher at a university, which is paying you to teach students and also expecting you to do research, to do advanced research, and that research will then inform your teaching also. So, and in order to be able to do that, you need to get a PhD. So you need to become a professional, a licensed kind of professional, who's approved by a community of peers. So these two things are taking place in Germany really in the 1800s and are accelerating then.
That's the first clip.
That's the first
talking
clip.
about pretty much the licensing guilds,
right? The licensing
through the universities and the PhD,
and the gate-kept nature of
the sciences.
The sciences. So this shows that there's been there's been an agenda to essentially hijack the so-called prestigious label of science and its seemingly innocent pursuit of truth, or its transparent pursuit of truth, into compartmentalized, easily manipulated factions of protected credentialist understanding of things. And you see this in the New Testament scholarship as well. Like you can't question the underlying so-called truth that the document is derived upon. And
Adam, I just responding to some feedback in the live chat that maybe we're sidetracking the conversation. We thought that not that we wanted to make it strictly about the shape of the Earth. I'm not asking you to disbelieve your eyes. I'm actually asking you to maybe think differently about what you see and consider that we do have to believe a lot of what the astrophysicists say passed down from on high in a similar way as we're supposed to believe the rabbis or the priests or whatever. But yeah, comments on that clip and what Xavier said there.
It reminds me of the academic gatekeepers in theology.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
There's a guy I follow on Twitter. His name is Joel Baden, and I've seen him on these YouTube atheist shows, and he's the professor of like Hebrew studies, PhD in the Torah, and it says on his bio on his Twitter, like teaching the Torah and defending the Jewish people. And I'm thinking, can you be an honest interpreter of the Bible and theology at Yale when your agenda is to defend the Jewish people? And I think not.
A bit of a rhetorical question.
You're going to get a watered down version, and the academic gatekeepers, many of them are holding up the historical Jesus lie. Even they even gatekeep that issue with guys like Bart Ehrman, in my opinion, and others. And they lie. History is written by the victors and the propagandists, and definitely science, like we see with COVID, science can be bought and controlled and gatekept.
One of the best things you've ever said, Adam. You said recently.
On certain things, I think we can agree that that some things really are the way they say they are. Not everything is a lie.
Well, I'm not saying that everything is a lie, but really more that there are mass misconceptions that are bandied about as indisputable or irrefutable declarations of truth or fact. And I think there is an important distinction to be made there, that people can labor under mass misconceptions thinking that they are doing the very best and most honest thing that they can possibly do to believe in the truth. And that's a little bit different than a malicious or sort of a intentional lie. So maybe it's a type of lie because there's deceit built into the belief structure that it's true, but it's not a lie in the sense that people don't fully know the implication of what they're believing or the foundations of their convictions. So I think that there's there's three different categories of belief, basically. There's unreasonable belief, right, that frogs cause warts or something, that can be disproven. There's blind belief, where maybe you're believing in the right thing, but you don't know why you really believe it. You've just sort of been told about it. And then there's dogmatic or doctrinal belief, which is you have a pre-existing framework that instructs your ability to parse data, and you never ultimately question the dogma or the doctrine itself. It's just being used as a lens through which phenomena is viewed. So applying that to the sciences, there was a long-standing belief for hundreds of years that there was a special compound called phlogiston that allowed things to burn, that all objects had phlogiston built into it. And it was later discovered that no, it's actually oxygen. It's gas that's being released out of specific objects that are flammable. There isn't a underlying universal substrate within all things called phlogiston. So what I'm trying to indicate here is that there are standards and things that epistemological ruptures that happen within the sciences.
You can see them in
that
the shape of bubbles,
basically lay bare many of the false
spheres,
beliefs
the
or mass
sacred kind of
misconceptions
balanced
that
number.
were had
So why is
prior
it
to
so
the
hard to believe? We
epistemological
can
break
look up
or
and we can see the sun,
better
it's a
explanation.
sphere. We can see the
So
moon,
I think
it's a
that
sphere.
there's a
We can
lot
see
of
the
better
Earth's shadow, it's
explanations
a
out
sphere.
there than
Why is
than
it so
sort of
hard to believe that the
chaotic,
sphere is just a
inchoate,
natural shape,
atomistic schizophrenia
in the cosmos?
Well, it's one thing to cite liquid surface tension with air within it supporting the form. It's another thing to assert that the sphere is a natural entity that can be projected or described onto various things. And there is a difference between a circle and a sphere. So,
and an oblate spheroid.
And an oblate spheroid, for that matter, which is Neil deGrasse Tyson. The issue is that even mainline heliocentric frames of reference say that we only see one side of the moon ever, which is
so it's more of a circle than a sphere.
It's really more of a circle than a sphere. But even if we were to admit that there's some sort of sphericity, we don't know the composition of this thing. Any attempt to sort of derive a material composition is again based on authoritarian hearsay. That you have to believe that.
No, you can on a clear night you can clearly see all the craters on the moon.
But
so
you don't know that those are craters, though. You don't know that they're craters.
Well, I see asteroids burning up in our atmosphere, and I've seen that, experienced that with my own eyes. So I can imagine if we're getting hit by space dust, it's probably getting hit by space dust.
Well, but
is that not logical?
But Adam, did you have the asteroid fall in your backyard, or did you just see a light phenomenon in the sky and presume it's an asteroid, as the astrophysics community tells us?
I visited craters. I visited craters from asteroids that people saw burning up in the sky and land. And yes, I've seen many meteor showers. You can see them burn up and evaporate and go out. Like, what do you guys think?
So, but you never see meteors traveling up from the horizon vertically towards Polaris, for example. It all comes down towards the horizon. So if we're really in an acentric universe, you ought to have meteors that are coming up from the horizon as well and going out of distance into the top of our view. So I think that
I've seen them coming in all types of crazy angles.
Well, yeah, but you never see it terminate into the apex of your view of the sky.
Okay, well, so what do you guys think is a better explanation? If you're going to say my natural explanation is true, like what do you think these things are burning up in the sky?
Well,
what do you think the sun really is? What do you think the moon really is?
I think the most honest thing to say is that we don't actually know, and to think that we do because some people in the astrophysics community say that we do, I can't get on board with that. One thing we can do is look at the people who actually make claims. Okay, So I didn't claim that the Earth was a disk or that there was a dome. Some might superimpose those beliefs because I'm maybe questioning some things in common with other people who believe that. But one thing that they do claim is like the actual circumference of the Earth, like it's roughly 26,000 miles. They have a figure on that. You can actually measure with equipment you could buy from bhphoto.com. You know, you can disprove that calculation by, number one, shooting a laser of sufficient power a certain distance and find out that it doesn't terminate where they say the curve would be based on that $26,000 mile calculation. So what's going on there? Maybe it is a sphere, but they're lying about the true size of it.
That's one possibility. However, there's also motion, and the 6 different motions that are supposedly taking place at variable speeds that are truly mind-boggling, in order to uphold this idea that we're actually revolving around a light source that is immensely huge at an immensely elongated distance, when there's actually no real physical evidence to prove that the light that we see as the sun is bigger than the plane of observation by which we take measurement. So that's also another presumption, as well as the Hipparchus axiom that the lights in the sky besides the sun and the moon are supposedly infinitely far away. So in other words, the argument really is that there are unchecked presumptions and assumptions at the very bedrock of the epistemology that undergirds much of physics, and you know that goes into the whole desire to have a mystical, authoritarian reunification of the sciences and religion, because there are so many of these premises in the sciences that have to merely be upheld based on the credentialed experts or inherited teachings and discoveries that have been disseminated over time. So I want to get to this other clip of she's an extremely popular YouTuber, has over 1 million subscribers, and in this particular clip,
which one is it?
If you go a little farther down, it's this one, yeah, her. This is a quicker clip. Mayim Bialik, you know, she's a scientist, but she also upholds this identity of Judaism, and I think that it's important to see this particular argument that she puts forward as really a fundamental basis for what is called the New Age movement that's referenced a lot, and including with your recent stream with Donnie Darkened. And so I think actually a lot of the New Age has always already been influenced by Kabbalistic egregores and thought formations. So this is an example of a attempt to reunify science and religion under this identitarian Judeo ethos. Go ahead and play this one.
As many of you know, I'm a scientist. I'm also a person who's part of an organized system of religion. In particular, I'm Jewish, and I believe in the tenets of Judaism, and I actually get a lot out of religious observance. You might be wondering, how can you be a scientist and also be a religious person? Scientists are only supposed to believe in observable, quantifiable things that they can physically have proof of. Isn't being religious fundamentally in opposition to everything that being a scientist is about? These are good questions. I'm a thoughtful person, I'm a skeptical person, and I am not a person who believes blindly in anything. So how is it that I believe in God, and what does that belief look like? Well, maybe it's easier to start with what I don't believe God is. I don't believe God is an old man with a beard in the sky who grants you magic fairy wishes if you recite the right words or feel guilty enough. I don't believe that God can grant you a parking space if you pray hard enough. And I don't believe that God has set up some code of behavior, and if I don't live by it, I won't be granted my place in heaven among the angels. So if the God I believe in isn't all of those things, who is God? Well, the God I believe in is the force in the universe that drives all of the phenomena that we experience as human beings. God is gravity, and God is centrifugal force, and God is the answer to why everything is the way it is in the natural world. You might be thinking, well, that's not God, that's just science. I guess you're right, but In my cultural and religious tradition that goes back thousands of years, we have a tremendous sense of gratitude and humility for our place in the natural and scientific world. Understanding equations that describe gravity and pressure and force and torque is science, and that's amazing. But having a spiritual connection with that information, so much so that it brings you to your knees because it is so unbelievable, is what it means to have a relationship with God. I also ascribe our ability to think, to reason, to love, to build, to create as divine, because it's amazing that we exist. Like, do you ever get that feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we exist? I get that feeling all the time. A closeness with a notion of God gives me the opportunity to experience myself as a spiritual being and not just a physical or a mental one. But having a relationship with God gives me a chance to understand my inner world in a way that can't be measured by inches or SAT scores or HDL, LDL ratios or by diplomas hung on the wall commemorating learned information. It can be measured by the way it feels when you read a poem or a psalm and you feel like someone out there understands you and there is a purpose to continuing your existence. It can be measured by the way it feels when your stomach flip-flops over and drops to the ground when you stare into the eyes of someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with. It can be measured by the enormity of emotions you feel when you look at the Milky Way or when your baby smiles at you for the first time. It can be measured by the depths of despair that you feel when someone breaks your heart. And it can also be measured by the hope you feel when you know that you will love again. So what do I get from religion? Well, my religious practice gives me discipline. It's normal and healthy for human beings to have boundaries, and I guess to what extent you want them is kind of up to you. For me, my religious tradition helps me to think hard about decisions I make. I only eat certain foods, I make it a priority not to gossip, to learn to be more compassionate, to find ways to repair the world, to meditate, to seek justice and pursue it. All of these things are guided by the structure of my religious faith. And I'm inspired by the notion of a responsibility to a universe that is governed by something bigger than me. It's okay for smart people to believe in religion, and we aren't always happy with how religion looks or how religious people act. But there's a force in the universe that underlies all of this beautiful chaos. And understanding the relationship between science and God, I think, makes me a better scientist and a more complete person. So I'm sticking to that. Subscribe to my channel. See you next time.
That's a pretty full-throated articulation of the merger of these various subversive strains of thinking that we've been talking about.
Yeah, that was just straight rationalization pill pull for her to not abandon the absurdities of the Torah, like, and to try to make it sound sophisticated and have all this value and stuff. Like, that's absurd. Like, does she believe that Moses really got the commandments from God on Mount Sinai? Does she believe that the wife of Lot turned back and got turned into a pillar of salt? Does she believe any of these things are actually real, or they're all myths and she's just reading into it whatever she wants to fit her own beliefs and her own agenda, or is she interpreting it in a way that she can rationalize, you know, the way she lives her life? That's what it seemed like to me. That's an interesting clip to see sort of a secular scientist, and it's funny because this girl's Big Bang Theory, she was almost the next Jeopardy host. They really seem to like to promote her a lot as the brainy Jewish girl, basically.
Right, but I think there's also a rationalization in there that science is essentially an incomplete worldview without the underpinning of the moral authority of this religious identity. And so you see that in the creation of things like bioethics, and we can, if you look at bioethics boards, you can see who really dominates those boards. And this attitude undergirds the need to mystify science in a religious light, while simultaneously rendering the religious identity something that's of scientific merit. So I think that's just
a good point too. Yeah. She is doing the Gaon of Vilna of blending the science and the Judaism, which Kabbalah is like the inner secrets of Judaism. So she is definitely trying
and
to
string
kind of
theory apparently
make them seem like they're coherent. Yeah, string theory they try to say is Kabbalistic.